The Chair recognizes the member from Etobicoke North.
Thank you, Speaker. Honourable Ministers, Clerk DesRosiers, Deputy Clerk Deller, my fellow parliamentarians, and through you, Speaker, to the people of Ontario. It is, Speaker, with a great sense of honour, pride, and solemn responsibility and duty that it's my privilege to second the motion to adopt the speech from the throne. It's also, sir, a great honour to be part of a government, part of an agenda, and part of the McGuinty vision, which states as our platform a mandate for excellence in education, improving our health care, building stronger communities, and laying the foundation for economic prosperity. A message of hope that has been widely appreciated from the great riding of Etobicoke North, Speaker, the riding that I have the privilege to represent. Sir, it's with a sense of history and heritage and knowledge of the weight of parliamentary democracy that I speak before you. For example, I quote from the address and reply to the throne speech that was made in 1903, 100 years ago, and I think this applies to our government still. I quote, "I feel assured that your legislative labours during the present session will be characterized by the same earnest care and thoughtful attention as have heretofore marked the work of the Legislative Assembly of Ontario." End quote. Sir, Speaker, people of Ontario, that was tabled at 3:30 p.m. March 10th, 1903. In order to highlight some of my remarks, I'd like to offer a personal vision and offer some road signs or guideposts under 6 different headings that I'd just like to address some brief commentary. The first is as a matter of introduction. The second, as a Liberal. The third, as a physician. The fourth, as a South Asian Canadian or a multicultural Canadian or a hyphenated Canadian. The fifth is as a writer or media commentator, and the sixth is as an MPP and parliamentary assistant. I'd like, Speaker, by way of introduction, to quote from the father of Western medicine, whose oath, Hippocrates that is, whose oath I swore in 1988 at Convocation Hall at the University of Toronto, not too far from where I speak today. He wrote in the 4th century Greece, BC, "Life is short, the art so long, experience deceptive, judgment difficult, and opportunity fugitive." And I think this very well highlights not only the dilemma that a physician faces, but that to those of the legislators. I represent proudly here, Speaker, the 120,000 residents of Etobicoke North, and I'm reminded from some of my days spent in kindergarten, when we were actually taught a lesson which I used to think was the Ontario provincial anthem, and it went something like this: "Give us a place to stand and a place to grow, and call this land Ontario." And I wish that this would come back into vogue, but it seems to me, Speaker, that my particular riding, Etobicoke North, is such a land. Bordered by Steeles and the Humber River, Dixon Road, 401, and Highway 27, it remains to this day a vibrant and energetic place for both old and new Canadians to grow, to stand, to progress, and to flourish, with the busy thoroughfares of Albion and Islington and Kipling and Rexdale and Highway 27 and Dixon Road. And I think the residents of the riding of Etobicoke North will especially benefit as we bring to law and bring to pass our ambitious agenda, Speaker, which puts people first. As a Liberal, the Liberal values, I think, were very well codified in the throne speech, and I would like to invoke now the mantle of one of the great Canadians of this century, a nation builder, and whether we offer him a mountain or a highway bearing his name, I think the mantle of Pierre Elliott Trudeau remains with us still, abides, and informs our judgments and our legacy and our vision. And I'd like to quote, sir, from one of the books that he wrote of the title, "Towards a Just Society." Pierre Elliott Trudeau, Prime Minister, wrote, "In my thinking, the value with the highest priority in the pursuit of a just society had become equality of opportunity. It is with great pride, Speaker, that I bring to your attention and through you to the people of Ontario that it was the immigrants, many of whom came on his watch, who have now spawned their second and third generations, of which I number. And that is one of the reasons why his name is spoken of so fondly in many circles. As Prime Minister Jean Chrétien mentioned at his farewell address here in Toronto most recently. Nous célébrons la vision, la passion.
A déclaré, we celebrate the vision of this country.
Not only the heritage of Trudeau, but I'd like to share with you the encounter that I had with the then MPP from Ottawa South, 1996, before he was the Honourable Premier of this province, before he was even Leader of the Opposition, one Dalton McGuinty. I happened to be sitting next to him at a dinner, a multicultural dinner of the Multicultural Society of Pakistani Canadians, arranged by my friend and colleague and advisor, Mr. Qamar Sadiq. And as we spoke throughout the evening over a couple of hours, and I learned of his vision for healthcare, for education, and fiscal responsibility, it became clear to me that he fully embodied the vision that is actually carved into the august wood of this very chamber: integrity, industry, and intelligence. And just as one example of that, Speaker, and through you to the people of Ontario, Premier McGuinty has appointed every single one of the members of his caucus to powerful cabinet committees so that we will have a true and honest and forthright say in the legislation that will affect the lives of Ontarians. I'd also like to, with your permission, recall the MPP, some encounters with the MPP from Scarborough Rouge River, one Mr. Alvin Curling, who was there for me, sir, on a personal basis, to always lend a hand and wise counsel and advice and strategy. And I recall the words of the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "There will come a time when people will be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." And I'm honored to speak, sir, in front of the first black speaker that this chamber has ever had. I'd also like to recall for a moment some of the events, encounters associated with the then MPP for Toronto Centre Rosedale, one Mr. George Smitherman. Following the terrible events of September 11, 2001, many people, many multicultural Canadians, especially those of Middle Eastern background, Asian background, Muslim background, recalled once upon a time a dark phase of Canadian history when Japanese Canadians, following the episodes of World War II, were actually interned, were actually imprisoned in a sense. We felt that there might be some kind of new form of internment, perhaps a virtual internment, a new form of internment of the mind. And I say that, Speaker, not as mere sophistry or academics, because there were others in this House who sought to exploit that time of vulnerability for that community, who wanted to invoke the old adage of divide and rule and divide and conquer, or strategic blame, narrow casting, wedge politics and wedge issues. And that is certainly not the mandate of this government, to show tolerance and respect for others and liberal values. I would like to say, with regard to the MPP from Toronto Centre Rosedale, that his honourable conduct then preceded by several years the title of honourable that he bears now, because at that time there was a press conference held immediately after the events of September 11th at one of the largest mosques here in Toronto. And I'd like to say that the very first member of this legislature who came to that event to reassure that particular group, that particular population, of the values of tolerance and respect was, in fact, Mr. George Smitherman, the MPP for Toronto Centre Rosedale.